You're listening to Free Mama Radio, where we believe you can have both a successful business and show up as the mom you want to be. I'm your host, Lauren Golden, a mom who built a full-time income working part-time hours. Now, I help other moms like you learn how to work from home on your own terms, take control of your schedule, and make more money so you can live a totally awesome, guilt-free life. I am on a mission to make sure that no mother has to choose between family and financial stability. So if you've been wondering, can I really have it all? This podcast will give you the answers.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Free Mama Radio. I'm so excited to be here with my friend Rachel. She had me on her podcast, maybe 2 years ago, year and a half ago. I don't know.
A year and a half at least. Yeah.
We already established that I've lost all track of time since COVID because we were talking about her podcast anniversary party, which I found out was a year ago. I'm like, it was like a few months ago, right? Yeah, no, it was a year ago. So Rachel is the host of the 3 in 30 Takeaways for Mom, a podcast for women who want to love motherhood as much as they love their children. Each 30-minute episode features 3 actionable takeaways for moms to try in their homes that week. And I love the format of your podcast because here in the Free Mama community, we are all about action-taking tips, momentum, movement, implementation. Motivation is great, but without the follow through doesn't mean quite as much. So before Rachel started her podcast, she was a stay-at-home mom with no business, marketing, or social media background in 2017. Just 3 years later, she has grown her show to be one of the top ranking parenting podcasts with over 3 million downloads in under 3 years, which is quite the accomplishment. I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, we can talk more about that. It's definitely been a surprise for me.
Tell me more about that. Let's start there. What is surprising to you about it?
Well, when I started my show, it was just because I miss teaching. So I was a high school English teacher before my kids were born, decided to stay home with them. I had to fight really hard to get my kids here. My son's adopted and my daughter was conceived with IVF. And so I had just visualized that I was just going to love every minute of this, this miracle motherhood. And then come to find out motherhood was extremely difficult. And I just really missed using my gifts and my skills as a teacher. But I also didn't want to go back full time because I know how much it takes out of you, especially the grading as a high school English teacher. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to start my show just as a way for me to keep using kind of my gifts as a teacher. And I never imagined that it would grow into a business or that, it would grow into this amazing community that I have, but I'm just so grateful for it.
Now, you teach other people how to build podcasts. When you started in 2017, why did you decide the podcast route instead of YouTube or Facebook or what? Like, what was appealing to you about doing a podcast other than the fact that, by the way, you have a fantastic voice?
Oh, thank you. I wrote a lot actually. So I started out writing articles for Power of Moms, and that was kind of my outlet when I was a stay-at-home mom. But I just found that it just seemed like more and more people were listening to stuff and people weren't reading as much. And so I would pour hours and hours into these blog posts and I was just like, nobody is reading this stuff. So I basically just took the format of the types of articles that I would write, because a lot of times I would write like 3 ways to journal as a busy mom or different things like that. And I'm like, let's just turn this into a podcast, because I couldn't really find any podcasts that had a similar format to that, especially in the motherhood genre. It seemed like most of the time they were just long conversations between 2 moms and they had good takeaways, but they were kind of buried in there. And I'm like, no, I need the tips. Like, I don't have much time. Give it to me and let's go. And so that's why I decided to create my show.
I love that. And so it sounds like, in the entrepreneurial space, I've found that a lot of people's avatar, the person that they're selling to, is like a former version of themselves, right?
Oh, so yeah, 100%.
Sounds like your podcast was maybe a little self-serving in those early days, maybe still today, where you're looking for help from your guests. Like, what's working for you? What's working for you? Like, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what did your family life look like when you first started the podcast?
Yeah, well, you're totally right that like we create what we want, and so even in that little tagline that you read, it said a podcast for women who want to love motherhood as much as they love their children. And that's because in those early motherhood days, I loved my children fiercely, but I didn't love motherhood. And like, I didn't love, especially stay-at-home motherhood was really hard for me and all of the dailiness of it. And I missed talking to adults and yet I desperately wanted to love motherhood. I knew I loved my children, but I couldn't quite like navigate this new role. And so that is why I decided to create my show for women who felt like that, and giving them like the best tips and tools and tactics for how to find more meaning in their daily life as a mom. I'm not sure if I answered your question there or not,
Totally.
but that's the origin of it all.
So how has that changed for you over the last few years? Do you love motherhood more?
Yeah, I love motherhood so much more. And now I remember you did ask what was my like daily life like. Well, I had these two really strong-willed little ones. And it's just those young motherhood years are so demanding, like emotionally, physically, everything. And because I didn't have an outlet of my own, it just felt like I was giving, and didn't have any way to refill. And now that I have, first of all, my kids are a little older now, which I do think has made a tremendous difference for me. I mean, those baby toddler years are the best in so many ways because they're just so cute and squishy and fun and funny. But like my kids are fairly independent now. We can have like conversations about the world and about life. And it just fits me better as a mom. And also now that I have my show, I have something that fills me up that I do feel like makes me a much better mom because I'm so much happier in my day-to-day life.
I love that. Do you have a favorite episode or a couple of favorite episodes?
Oh, wow. How could I?
Is that like asking you which is your favorite child?
Yes. It is kind of. And I really do.
A standout piece of advice maybe that you've implemented from your show over the years.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. I think one of the most impactful episodes for me personally in my mothering was I had Georgia Anderson on. She is a Gottman trained emotions coach. And she talked about how to coach your kids through their big emotions. And I have my son, my oldest, has really, really big emotions. And so just having her talk me through, I like actually gave her a scenario on the air of something that had happened like the day before with my son, where he had just lost it. And I talked her through like, how could I have done this differently? How could I have coached him through that better? And she gave me really concrete tips about noticing the emotions when they're small and acknowledging them and saying, hey, I can see that you feel like really discouraged or frustrated right now. And really just validating those emotions more than like trying to squash them. And then later that same week, when I sensed another meltdown coming, I tried the strategies and it worked. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. And so now I feel like it's very natural for me to be his emotions coach, but I do attribute that back to that episode. And I think it was like episode 23 or something. So it was fairly close to the beginning that has really fundamentally changed the way that I parent my kids from more of a place of grace and gentleness and acceptance of their emotions versus like being afraid of their emotions or trying to squash them or control them. So it's really changed how I mother.
I love that. Well, we will go find that episode and we will make sure we include that on our show notes over at freemamaradio.com because I'm about to Google it myself. That's really fantastic. So Rachel, before you started your podcast, you said that you were staying home full time with your kiddos. How did that affect your routines? I mean, I don't know off the top of my head how many podcast episodes you're doing a week. Were you always doing your own editing and you're promoting? Like, what did that look like for you to essentially take on work that you hadn't previously been doing? And how did that affect your schedule in those early days?
Yeah. So especially the first year, I did everything myself. And then after a year, once I started, I had a little bit of a bigger community. I had some ad revenue and stuff. Then I started hiring more stuff out. So like now I don't edit my own show anymore, stuff like that. But initially, I was doing all of it. And it was a challenge to figure out how to fit it in, but also it was worth figuring out how to fit it in because of the fulfillment and everything that it brought me. And I think one of the primary ways that I did that was just quiet time for my kids was just a non-negotiable. Like you will do 2 hours of quiet time every day because I needed it. And I also feel that it's very, very good for kids to have a break and have independent play and creativity. And I have a whole episode on my show about how to get your kids to do quiet time, especially if they are like a more defiant, stronger, bigger personality, because my son is that way. And I honestly think if I can get Noah to do quiet time, like any mom can get any kid to do it with some tips that I have for how to structure that in. So I'd have that break during the day when I would work and I'd work before they, I'd like to say before they got up, but I was probably sleeping before they got up. But I'd work after they went to bed, and I just fit it in somehow. So that's how I made it work in those early days. And now that my kids are in school full time, although they're not this year because of COVID, I have more work time typically, but this year's been really different and it's a challenge. I'm going to have to adjust to it.
Yeah, we're all in that season.
Yeah.
Well, I know you brought some tips for working from home, but before we get to that, I want to talk about your community. You referenced it a little bit earlier. Is that something that you anticipated happening when you, like, I love my Free Mama community. Like, they are the best people on the internet. And I love my community. And I know you probably feel that way about yours. And I will say shout out to all the 3 and 30 listeners, because when I was able to be on your show, we had a lot of people come join our community and say that was how they had found out about us. What does that mean to you to know that you're serving? I mean, 3 million downloads, that's awesome. Like, that's so powerful. Like, how does that feel for you? And how do you show up for your community? And just what does that look like to you?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I love it. It means so much to me. I didn't anticipate it. I think I couldn't anticipate it because I didn't even know that something like this existed. Like, I couldn't conceptualize what it could look like to now have this community of really intentional women who I just feel like care so deeply about their motherhood, but also about the world. Like, a certain type of woman is attracted to 3 and 30, and she's just good. Like, it's just good. And like, last week's episode was about how to have grace-filled political conversations. And that can be right now that is so heated and hard, and just when I went on Instagram and shared some of my own political views, and I said, I'm like, this is hard for me, but we need to talk about, we need to be able to have grace-filled political conversations. I was just blown away by the grace and not everybody agreed with me, but everybody was just wanting to learn from each other and listening. And the comments were so beautiful. And then people start coming from outside. When you talk politics, people start coming from outside, and then they start getting nasty. And you're like, I can tell that person's not part of this community because they don't have the context. Yeah. They don't know my heart. They don't know the heart of the people here. But the people here in this community are just so good. And it's been such a huge blessing for me to have them in my life and to have their support.
I love that so much. And I know because you have this community now that you have actually created, is it a program where you teach them how to do essentially what you've done, how to start their own podcast and leverage their voice? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I teach courses with actually a dear friend of mine, Monica Packer, who has a podcast as well called About Progress. And we teamed up to create some courses specifically for busy moms for how to start and grow podcasts, because so many of the courses and things that we saw out there were from business people or people who have lots of marketing experience. And neither of us were coming from that place when we started our shows. We both just had messages that we wanted to share, and we knew nothing. And we just started. And so many of the women in our Podcast You programs are that. They are the stay-at-home moms or the moms who just want to have a little side gig or side hustle podcast, but they don't even know where to start. And so we really have built the courses with that woman in mind, in the hopes that it will bring them as much fulfillment as it has brought the two of us through podcasting.
That is so awesome. And if anybody wants to learn more about that, if their ears are perked right now, Rachel, and they're like, oh my gosh, I have got to know about podcasting, where can they go check out that information?
Yeah. So it's podcastu.co. And I don't know when this episode is going to air. We're teaching some free classes this month in September, but even if it's after that, when this episode airs, the courses are available to purchase. And I'll give you a link to put in the show notes, because we would love to have anybody who's been either wanting to start or has a podcast and they're just a little frustrated that it's not growing like they'd like it to. We'd love to help you.
That's so fantastic. Well, I had asked you before you came, as a mom now who's working from home, got your beautiful podcast, your amazing community of followers, all of your devoted listeners. What are 3 tips that have been serving you as working from home as a mom?
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. I know I'm like, do you want me to come with takeaways? Because that's my thing. 3 takeaways.
I'm not quite as systemized as you with your 3 and 30. That's next level, Lauren. We're getting there, but something my audience is very used to hearing me talk about is I am about the action. We say, yes, right? You've got to implement. you can't just learn it. You've got to go use what you've learned, or it's not going to actually make a difference in your life. So
totally.
we're on the same page, Rachel.
Yeah. Yeah. So I sort of sat down and I brainstormed what are like 3 major takeaways I have about working from home, whether you're podcasting, whatever you're doing. I know a lot of women in your community are VAs, right?
Yeah.
And especially if you have littles that wouldn't be in school anyway, or if you have kids that are typically in school that are not in school this year. I hope that these tips will help you. So the first takeaway that I have is ask for support, not permission, from the people in your life, or particularly from your partner, if you have one. And this is something I learned from Sarah Dean from the Shameless Mom Academy.
I love that. I just interviewed her like 2 weeks ago. She's
great.
Really?
She's so awesome. And when she taught, like I heard her say that phrase, I was like, oh, that is so good. Ask for support, not permission.
I love that.
So, because I think as women, so often we don't really feel we deserve, like it's us feeling like maybe I don't deserve to have this time to work, or maybe it's too much to ask my partner after they get home from work to take the kids so I can work. But once you decide that you actually do deserve to do the work that you love and to be refilled and refueled, then you're not going to your partner saying like, can I, or will you please? You're saying, this is what I need and how can we make it work? And so there's a very big difference there, asking for that support. And it's not like in a demanding way where only my needs matter, but just saying to them, hey, I need 10 hours this week to complete the work projects that I have. And I don't want to stay up till the middle of the night every night getting that done. So how can we make this work? When can we switch off with kids? When can I take Saturday and you can take Sunday to have this, alone time to do whatever we want, whatever it might be. But just to remember that, ask for support, not permission. So that's my first takeaway.
I love that.
All right. Should I go into my second one?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Keep going, girlfriend. We're on a roll.
Okay. My second takeaway is to involve your kids whenever possible in your work. And I don't necessarily mean like with the actual tasks of your work, because sometimes that is possible. Sometimes it isn't. If you do have a business where you can involve them like with physical product and they could make boxes, or they could then do it and involve them as much as possible. But I also mean just to involve them in that you're talking to them about what you're doing. You're explaining why it matters, because I think so often we can just think of our kids as an inconvenience and like, I need to get them out of here. But when we stop, and I'll give you an example of this. So the other day, I was preparing some notes for this conversation about grace-filled political conversations. And I was really nervous because talking about politics is really nerve-wracking. And I was annoyed that my little girl was like climbing all over me. And while I was nervous and I was trying to prepare this thing, and I was about to get really frustrated or just plug her into a show, And instead I thought, no, I need to talk to her about what I'm doing. And so she's 6, but I took her in my lap and I said, hey, I am preparing to do a live presentation about something and I'm really nervous about it. And it's a really important topic. This is what I'm talking about. I'm feeling really nervous. Do you see my hands are shaking? This is why. And it's because, but sometimes we have to do scary things. And even I'm doing something scary. And can you help me by playing quietly while I prepare this? And it was just it meant so much to me to be able to like involve her and teach her through my work and my example, instead of just shushing her or plugging her in or sending her away. And then she went and told her brother that what I was doing, and they actually ended up watching my live. And I like waved at him and I'm like, talk to him afterwards about how sometimes you have to stretch yourself and do things outside of your comfort zone. And so I think just involving them in that way, talking to them about what you're doing and why. I remember one time saying to my son, just thanking him. I said, hey, Noah, I know that you don't get as much of me as you might if I weren't doing my podcast, and you sacrifice time with me so that I can do this work. But I just want you to know that it's making a really big difference to a lot of families. And here's some of the comments that I've gotten, and you are making that possible. You're part of this too. And thank you for sacrificing time with me so that I can bless other people. And, our whole family, this is our whole family's work. And just him knowing that and understanding that, I think makes him resent it less and kind of support me more. So I think just bringing your kids and involving them in your work in whatever way you can, and having conversations with them about it is really important.
That was so beautiful, first of all. So thank you so much for that gift. Like, I went with you on that journey where you're irritable and you're frustrated. And it's like, how do I turn this into a teachable moment? An example that I always give of that is like, I have no problem apologizing to my kids because I always see the teaching opportunity. I struggle to apologize to my spouse. We're working on that part. We got some growth to do. With my kids, I'm always so hyper aware of like, I struggled with perfectionism and just being such a high achiever. And my oldest daughter's a lot like me. And so I always see those moments where I'm like, man, if I would have learned this before I turned 30, like maybe my whole childhood would have been different. And so I like to seize those opportunities. But I mean, I got chills, Rachel, when you were talking about thanking your son for his involvement and for that space that he gives you to impact other people. Like, even my 3-year-old knows what a free mama is. Like, she was helping me pack little swag bags that's why I was chuckling. She was helping me. She likes to rip the label off the mailer and like fold the sticker.
Yeah.
She's 3. And she every time, free mama, and like pass it on. And so they do understand. And just before our interview today, I was on a coaching call and several women are like, how do I teach my kids about this? How do I get them interested in entrepreneurship? And my response was like, you're leading by example. Like, and you have this opportunity to talk to them. But Rachel, you just gave me so many ideas of ways that I can open this up even more with my family. So thank you for that. That was a really, really great tip.
Oh, thank you. And I do feel like sometimes we forget that they don't know what we're doing. They don't know what we're doing when we're sitting at our computer and when we have to actually talk to them about it. And
or on our phone or,
Yeah. And even with this new COVID life, like I need to still work with my kids to figure out a routine, like work with them and say, okay, here's the deal. You guys need my help when you do school at home. I need work time at some point during the day. Let's figure out a routine of when all of our needs can be met, and like to kind of get their ideas and get them on board that way. I have a friend who did that with her kids, and they came up with a plan that she would put on her office door, red or green, to let them know whether it was okay to come in. The red means no excuse to come in unless there's blood or like a serious emergency. And I just thought how cool that she like talked them through that and gave them a visual cue. Yeah. So I think working with your kids to figure that out is really important. And that goes under this tip of just involving them wherever possible instead of resenting them.
Love that. Thank you. Yeah, seriously. But it's true. It sounds horrible, but we've all probably felt it at some point. That little ping of like, this just be so much easier. He just went out. Yeah, I get it. What's your third tip for us, Rachel?
So then my third tip is to put containers around your work and stick to them. Mm-hmm. And this really came to me when I was recently did like a home organization project. And professional organizers, they want a container for everything. And I realized that the reason why is because when you have a container for something, you can see when it's overflowing the container. So like when I did that and I put all my socks in there, I was like, holy cow, I have way too many socks. Like this is out of control. They're just overflowing everywhere. Whereas before, when they were just in my drawer, not in a container, I didn't really even notice how they were taking over. And so it helped me to kind of like go through and purge the socks. And I just think about that with work sometimes, that if I don't have a container around it, I don't even notice how much it's taking over and creeping into every nook and cranny in my life. But when I give myself a container, then I can say, whoa, I have taken on way too much. It doesn't all fit in here and it's impacting my family. So like, I need to have a better container around this, be that time. Like I will only work from these hours to these hours, and what doesn't fit in, doesn't fit in. But unless it is an absolute emergency, I am not working outside of these hours. Or it could be the number of projects you're willing to take on. So maybe you have a container around that where you say, I'll only take on 3 big projects at a time. And if new opportunities come around, but I'm already maxed out, I will know because of my container that I need to say no and believe that opportunity will come back around at some point. Because I just feel like I have the tendency and the personality to just think I can fit it in. I'll fit it in, like I'll smash it in. But then the people who suffer are my family, and I don't want that. And so I have to get honest with myself about protecting my work time and also protecting my family time by sort of containerizing things.
I love that. Well, we talk an awful lot about communication, expectations, and boundaries. So I'm hearing a lot of boundary talk that I I love the visualization you painted with the container and the socks though. Like you can really feel what you're talking about. Like it makes me want to go like check out my time blocking on my Google Calendar.
Yes,
like,
totally.
Totally.
And I do feel like it does come back to boundaries, but like boundaries with yourself. I feel like so often we talk about having boundaries with other people, and I actually am quite good at having boundaries with other people, but I need to have some boundaries with myself. That's the person that's the hardest for me to say, no, you're not going to take that on because you can't like look at your priorities. That doesn't fit. So yeah, that's helped me a lot.
Yeah, that's so good. And I talk a lot about like, there's like physical like space boundaries. Like you gave the example with the red light and the green light on the door, right? Like to me, that's a physical boundary. This is my office and I will let you know when you can cross that physical, like boundaries with your phones. Like I've got physical boundaries to get away from my phones because they're just addicting little things, right?
Oh yeah.
It's that self-control. So I love that so much. Well, Rachel, I have one last question for you. Thank you for these wonderful takeaways. Pretty much everybody in our community is a work from home mom at this point or aspiring to full-time work from home. So I know that you're going to be super valuable for everybody listening. I think you're familiar, but the mission of the Free Mama is to make sure that no mother has to choose between family and financial stability. So knowing that and knowing a little bit about our community, is there anything you weren't able to share in today's conversation that words of wisdom, piece of advice, a lesson you learned that you would like to pass along to all of the listeners today?
First of all, I just love that mission. I fully agree with it. And I think that especially when you're first starting your business, sometimes the financial piece isn't there yet. You're building. And sometimes women have a hard time prioritizing work that they love if they're not getting paid for it or if they're not getting paid, quote, enough for it. And I want to just give everybody listening permission that it doesn't matter how much money you're making from the work that you love, you still deserve to do the work that you love. And you can prioritize that and you can feel good about it. And even like if you want to put your kids in childcare because you want to do work that you love, but you're only making as much as you're spending on childcare for a little while, that is okay because it is filling you up. It is making you a better mom and you are putting goodness out into the world. And sometimes you can't build a business until you have that time from putting them in childcare or whatever. And so it's an investment into your business, even if at first you're like, all I'm doing is paying and I'm not getting anything back. I think pretty much all entrepreneurs face that at the beginning, all startups. And so just give yourself permission to follow your bliss and the work that you want to do and believe in it and give yourself those boundaries and give your family the boundaries that you deserve to do work that you love and that it will eventually lead to financial freedom, even if at first maybe it doesn't.
I love that. And no other person I've interviewed has said even anything close to that. And it is such a beautiful message that people need to hear. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
I know someone listening right now who's like, oh my gosh, she's talking to me right now.
Oh, good. I hope so. Because that was a big stumbling block for me when I started out. And I felt a lot of guilt around that I wasn't making money. And what is it really fair that I'm spending this time? And it is. So take my advice.
I love it. Rachel, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for being on Free Mama Radio.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me and for your awesome mission and this community that you've created.
See you guys.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Free Mama Radio. Don't forget to check out Free Mama TV right here on YouTube for hundreds of how-to videos and interviews to help you start, grow, and scale a virtual business from home. If you want to join a community of tens of thousands of moms just like you, make sure you join the Free Mama Movement group over on Facebook. And lastly, if you want to learn more about how we can do this together, work to achieve your goals, and make you our next success story, check out my free training at thefreemamamovement.com. I'll see you next time.